This RealAg Radio podcast is brought to you by Coragen Max insecticide from FMC. Get fast, selective, extended control of grasshoppers, Bertha armyworms, diamondback moth, and cutworms in a convenient, concentrated formulation. Coragen Max insecticide works alongside beneficials for a 1-2 punch that keeps the fight going long after you've left the field.
It's time for RealAg Radio on Rural Radio Channel 147 on Sirius XM. RealAg Radio and RealAgriculture.com is your home for insight and analysis of the issues that are impacting your farm business. Let's get real and get connected with RealAg Radio. Welcome to RealAg Radio here on Rural Radio 147, Sirius XM. Shaun Haney, your host here on this Monday edition of the show. Hey, thanks so much, everybody, for making RealAg Radio and Rural Radio 147 such a big part of your work day, especially as we are about to hit the field. Having Rural Radio on throughout the day gives you an opportunity to listen to great shows across the entire platform. Market Day Report in the morning for 5 hours. You've got Ag PhD, you've got Agri Talk, you've got Shark Farmer, and you've got us, and you can finish up the day with, of course, Commodity Wrap as well, find out what happened the day in the market. So it's great to be part of the lineup. We're so proud of it, and it's great to be with you here today. Whether you're farming in Canada, the U.S., or beyond, we are here to help you stay on top of the issues, and there is a lot of stuff happening. Now, on Mondays, we always focus on agronomy, and we'll do so again today. Peter Pete Johnson will be with me to discuss a number of different things. We've got some of your feedback, some thoughts about what people heard about some of the things that Pete and I have been talking about. We've also got a question. We picked on a state, Minnesota, and I happened to be there on the weekend, and I overheard some conversations talking about, should you be out there planting corn right now or not? And we're going to kind of run through that scenario, Pete and I, just using as an example of what's going through the growers' thoughts right now as spring really, really has hit us. But it is variable. I know in Lethbridge, beautiful today. In southern Alberta, beautiful today, but more snow's coming on the weekend. It's like a high of 5 Celsius on Friday. It's going to feel like freezing cold, but we'll take the moisture if it does come. We're also going to play some audio for you from an interview that I had in a recent wheat school with Shad Milligan of Syngenta, talking about why you should treat your seed. And of course, Syngenta is selling seed treatment, so Shad has he's got a particular point of view here. But we're going to dig into the conversation, some of the myths out there in terms of, a lot of people lean on treating seed early and think when things kind of warm up, maybe that's when you don't need to use a seed treatment. Syngenta has some data and some things they want to share in terms of that's actually not the case. I'm going to ask Wheat Pete about it as well. And we've also got time today for the top ag news stories of the day. Now, if you have any feedback on today's program, we'd love to hear from you. Send me an email, shaney@realagriculture.com. Or, of course, you can find us across all the different social media platforms. You can also call the RealAg feedback line. That is 855-776-6147. Let's take a break. And when we come back, we're going to bring in Wheat Pete. I think he's somewhere in a field. He's scouting wheat fields. We'll see what he's up to. You're listening to RealAg Radio, Rural Radio 147.
If you have a growing list of questions about getting more from your fields, know that Koch Agronomic Services has an answer for every acre. With a full spectrum of nutrient management, nutrient protection, and seed enhancement options, Koch Agronomic Services offers a deep portfolio of agronomically effective products. Each designed to enhance yield potential, all available to help solve your problems. Find the answer that's right for your acres. Start by visiting kochag.ca. That's Koch ag.ca.
Canola is more than just a pretty face in the prairie landscape. It's a big business, both here and around the world, that requires you to be informed and up to date on everything it takes to grow a successful crop. The Canola School on RealAgriculture.com has an expert library of video resources covering markets, agronomy, and more to help you grow a healthy and profitable canola crop. Visit canolaschool.com today. Brought to you by BASF Canada and Invigor Hybrid Canola. If you're involved in the agriculture industry, it's important to stay informed on all the latest issues affecting your business. At RealAgriculture.com, we offer fast, reliable news, information, and insights to help you keep on top of all of the latest in Canadian agriculture. Visit RealAgriculture.com and sign up for our free daily newsletter covering everything from news, agronomy, animal agriculture, and much more. Visit RealAgriculture.com/subscribe today.
And welcome back to RealAg Radio here on Agronomic Monday. For agronomically effective dual UAN inhibition, the smart answer is Tribune Nitrogen Stabilizer from Koch Agronomic Services. To learn how its 2 active ingredients protect UAN from 3 forms of nitrogen loss, visit kochag.ca. Somebody that hates nitrogen loss in the worst way, even more when his Blue Jays lose, which we witnessed together last week as a Real Ag team. It is Peter Wee Pete Johnson. Pete, how's it going?
It's going awesome, Shaun. It was kind of a crappy weekend. We had a lot of rain the last few days, but today the sun is shining, the sky is blue. Man, how could you? And it's warm. I think we're 10 or 12 degrees here in Bruce County. I'm in Bruce County scouting wheat today. I'm a happy camper.
Nice. And I'm accurate there. I'm not making fun of it. You hate nitrogen loss, don't you?
100% I hate nitrogen loss, because why would we, like, good grief, it costs a lot of money. When we lose it, it's a financial loss, and often it's an environmental impact as well. And so we just have to continue to learn to understand how nitrogen works and to prevent nitrogen loss every way that we can. And there's many different ways to do that. Split nitrogen application, using inhibitors such as Tribune, lots of ways to work at that. But yeah, why would you pay $1 a pound or 70 cents a pound for nitrogen and then have it go away? I make it sound simple, Shaun. It is absolutely not simple, but we need to do everything we can to avoid that. It's really quite critical.
Yeah, I'm super curious where, some of the companies that are working on, inhibitors, where that technology is like 10 years from now. Because I would expect some pretty amazing leaps forward. Like where we are today is not where we will be in the future. Now, maybe I'm wrong in that. I don't understand where we are in the innovation cycle, but that's just kind of my perception.
Yeah, and I hope you're right. It's been a long time since we got any new products. And by the way, Koch has just brought a couple of new products to the marketplace in that arena. So that's very cool. And because nitrogen loss is so variable and so hard to determine, the farmer puts on the nitrogen. They never see the loss unless it gets so significant that suddenly the crop goes nitrogen deficient when they know they've put enough on. But by then it's generally too late, or certainly close to being too late to rescue the crop. And it only happens under certain circumstances. So a grower could go 2, 3, 4 years with very little loss, and then get just that perfect storm of weather conditions, and kaboom, all of a sudden he's lost 30, 40, 50% of their nitrogen. And that's the real challenge, is to understand it. And if we could predict weather better, we would actually be able to do a better job of understanding or knowing when to protect it and how to deal with it. But it's like the rain this weekend. In Ontario, we have anywhere from about 1.5 inches total rainfall since Wednesday night, all the way up to 8 inches.
Whoa, 8 inches.
8 inches, 200 millimeters of rain. And that's a massive difference. So the people that got 1.5 inches, they're happy because it just nicely moved that nitrogen they applied on their wheat crop into the soil. It's not too saturated. The wheat's going to be happy. It's going to move on. The guys that got 8 inches that put nitrogen on, they're going, yeah, exactly. Like, where the heck did the nitrogen go? Meanwhile, the people that chose not to put nitrogen on their wheat, now they're saying, oh man, it's so wet out there. Like, am I going to lose yield because I can't get my nitrogen on soon enough? And we really get into like, it's such a conundrum, right? So yes, I hope we move forward with different nitrogen stabilizers, continue to move that bar forward, continue to get better and more nitrogen efficient. But who knows? Who knows what 10 years will bring, right?
Yeah, no, absolutely, absolutely. Okay, now I was in Minnesota on the weekend. I was in St. Cloud, Minnesota, and I was watching my oldest son play college baseball. It was a beautiful weather. Like it was, I had worn jeans and a long sleeve T-shirt on Saturday for the doubleheader, and I was overdressed. Like people were in shorts. Okay, so
Wow.
spring's here in Minnesota, and it was a beautiful weekend. It was interesting during, of course, what do good baseball parents do at a doubleheader? Well, you tailgate. And so I was tailgating with some of my fellow University of Mary parents, and there was a couple parents there from Minnesota that had made the drive from Minneapolis down to St. Cloud. And corn planting came up, and one of the dads said, I saw a corn planter rolling through the field, middle of April in Minnesota. That seems crazy. Now, I looked at the USDA's crop progress report. It hasn't even registered. Minnesota corn planting last week was at 0. Like, okay, we haven't even registered one yet. Then I see a tweet on Sunday from Alex Peterson, who's a Pioneer Strategic Account Manager out of Redwood Falls, Minnesota. And he put out a tweet with a graph talking about early planting of crops in Minnesota. Are those farmers that potentially are putting corn in right now, are they getting way ahead of themselves, Pete?
So I think the answer is, Shaun, it depends. And that's an agronomist answer. I know, but it really does. And the graph that Alex tweeted out is phenomenally interesting because it really comes down to the temperature of the water that the seed imbibes. Now, I know that the parent you talked to said they were planting corn. It might have been a corn planter planting wide row soybeans because we do know that soybeans.
That's what I said. That's what I told them. Oh my goodness! Look at Pete. Your training is really working.
Well, I wasn't there, so I'm not sure. But we do know that soybeans will tolerate cold temperatures, or they can compensate if they get beat up a bit. But with both corn and soybeans, the rate of imbibition of the water that goes into the seed to start germination is incredibly rapid. And so, for example, with soybeans, about 90% of the water that seed takes up to start germination happens in the first 10 hours. With corn, it's more like about 15 hours, but that's less than a day in both cases. And soybeans, less than half a day. And we know that if the soil, I mean, you said it was beautiful in Minnesota. So if it's beautiful, the sun's shining, it's black soil, it's worked soil, that soil's going to warm up. It may not be super warm at 2 inches deep if he's planting corn. Soybeans, he's probably 1.5 inches or 1.25 inches. So it'd be a little warmer. But what really matters is, when does the cold rain come? Because if we plant that seed into reasonably warm soil, it gets that 10 hours or that 15 hours and it imbibes reasonably warm water, then it can take a lot of cold and it will be fine. If, on the other hand, you get chased out of the field with a 2 degrees Celsius rain, and so now it's super cold water, and that plant sucks up that super cold water, you damage the enzymes in the plant, and we get this cold imbibition injury, and that can have that can be a replant scenario just because of that. So it really matters the first 24 hours, and if you can get past the first 24 hours with good warm soil, then chances are you'll be okay.
Can I give you a real world example here?
100%.
Okay. Okay, so here's the forecast. And we're talking specifically about Minnesota. This is the same consideration that people across a wide geography are having right now, but we're just using this as the example. Tuesday, so let's pretend you planted corn or soybeans last week. Tuesday, 13 Celsius, which is about 55 Fahrenheit, and 34 mils of rain. Okay, so 34 millimeters in inches, Google says about inch and a third.
Yeah, 1.4 inches, give or take.
Yep. So is that regret?
So to me, you're sort of on the edge when you're at that 55. So remember that the corn germinates at 50 degrees Fahrenheit or 10 degrees Celsius. Soybeans, we typically say about 12 Celsius or 55 Fahrenheit.
Oh, so right if it's edge.
Exactly, you're right on the edge of whether or not that, and if that's the air temperature, is because the rain is coming from up high, is it actually colder than the air temperature? And so it is really on the edge. Are you in trouble or not? Well, you're not in nearly as much trouble as you would be if it was 2 degrees Celsius or 36 degrees Fahrenheit when that rain fell. But remember, if you planted on Saturday even, if you planted on Friday or Saturday, that plant has already fully imbibed all of its water. So now the rainfall that comes, if it's super cold, it really doesn't matter because we're not getting that rapid uptake of cold water that damages the enzymes. So the seed is already fully imbibed. And so now all it needs is the water for growth, which is significantly less than the water for imbibition and to start that germination process.
Yeah. You can see how traditionally our modus operandi was to wait, right? Because there's a lot of variables, and there's a feeling the risk is higher, probably also true. But what we've learned through a lot of research is if you thread the needle, there is benefits of being on the early side. So this is very fascinating to me, this risk reward and how you manage it and how that, obviously what you do today and then the forecast and the result of that, it's a very, very interesting puzzle to me.
Yeah, absolutely. And if you think about it, corn needs to emerge uniformly. And that's another reason why we tend not to plant early, because we get into these microclimates in the field. And so this area is a little bit blacker than 6 inches away, and the corn seeds are 6 inches apart. So plant number one, it can emerge 2 or 3 days before plant number two. That immediately puts plant number two at a disadvantage. And so we tend to delay corn planting now because it's such a princess. It needs to all come up even. Whereas with soybeans, if plant one comes up 2 or 3 days before plant two, it doesn't matter much. They just compensate for each other. And so that's why we often see growers planting soybeans prior to corn. But nonetheless, both of them, if you within that first 24-hour period, you get that super cold rain, it hammers both of them.
On our Saskatchewan show on Saturday, Peter and I talked about the early planting of cereals and some of the agronomic considerations, all the way from seed placement to weed control. And we got some listener feedback, and we're going to get to that when we come back here on RealAg Radio. You're listening to Rural Radio 147, Sirius XM.
Want a product that will give you nitrogen all season long? Then you want to try Envita. Envita gets directly into the cells of the plants, and it's easy to apply, foliar or in furrow. Envita provides the flexibility you need for your farm practices. Whether you want to reduce your nitrogen and maintain yield, or maintain your nitrogen and increase yield, Envita fits your farm. Envita SC formulation is OMRI registered. To learn more about Envita, visit azotic.com. That's AZOTIC.com.
Before you get back in the field this year, spend some time with the Corn School on RealAgriculture.com. Get all the information you need on hybrid selection, planting depth, crop inputs, and more from a wide range of industry experts. A massive library of video content is available on demand when you need it most. Spend your time outside of the field, inside the classroom, with the Corn School on RealAgriculture.com.
Peter Johnson at Wheat Pete, RealAgriculture.com, and what an opportunity! Oh my gosh!
You think you can't grow better wheat? You are absolutely wrong. We're going to show you how to strive for those record wheat yields that they get in the UK and in New Zealand. You can grow 150 bushel wheat. I'll show you how.
Catch Wheat Pete's Word every Wednesday on RealAgriculture.com or download the podcast on iTunes or Spotify. Shaun Haney, your host here on RealAg Radio, here on Agronomic Monday. I'm joined by Peter Wheat Pete Johnson, who, if you're watching this on YouTube, you see that we now have a costume person who's dressing up some of our guests in appropriate apparel. Pete's in coveralls and a hat. So you're actually out working.
Oh, come on. What do you mean I'm actually out working? Thanks a lot, Shaun. Like, give me a break. Yes, I do work. I still work. I know I'm old and tired and slow, but I am out walking wheat fields, and I love doing. By the way, when I'm walking these wheat fields, it's that my rubber boots turn into snowshoes, which is kind of a frustration. But yeah. Anyway, yes, I'm working, Shaun. Thank you very much.
There's nothing I love better than poking the Wheat Pete bear. I love it. Hey, I want to tell everybody that the deadline to sign up for AgriStability is April 30th. Thanks to recent program changes, AgriStability coverage levels have significantly increased for 2020, or improved, I should say, significantly for 2024. To gain a better understanding of how AgriStability and other programs can improve your farm's risk management plan, I encourage you to go to mnp.ca. Looking forward to, I think on Wednesday's show or Friday's show, we're going to have Ryan Keurig, who's the tech specialist with MNP, going to talk about the budget that will be released by the federal government tomorrow. So, there's a lot of talk about tax increases. That's not going to make any of us happy, as well as maybe some other agricultural programming funding increases, and we'll see how it all shakes up. But Ryan Keurig will be our expert either on Wednesday's show or Friday with the Real Ag Issues panel. So stay tuned for that this week. Now, Pete, like I mentioned, on Saturday, you joined me for Real Ag on the Weekend, which is our show in Saskatchewan on the RealAg Radio Network, CKOM and CJME. And we talked about the go or no-go decision from a spring wheat and canola perspective, similar to what we just talked about with corn and beans. And it was really great. So I encourage people to check. We podcast that show as well, Real Ag on the Weekend, so you can find it wherever you get your podcasts. We had a listener, Jason Vogt, farms in Manitoba. He listened to the show, and he was hearing us talking about, okay, canola different than spring cereals on the early decision. And I don't want to, correct me if I'm wrong, but you had said that really across like oats, barley, and wheat, go early. Jason Vogt had commented, you have to be careful with oats and barley when it comes to cold soils. They don't tolerate cold and wet very well compared to spring wheat, especially for prolonged periods of time in the ground. So, Jason, appreciate that feedback. Pete, what do you think about that?
Yeah, so first off, Jason is an awesome agronomist, and if that's his experience in Manitoba, I take it at its word. In our data, we didn't see that. I will say that barley, like wheat doesn't like wet feet. Barley hates wet feet. And so if barley sits in cold, wet soils for an extended period of time, it just won't do as well. It's interesting in our data set that when we looked at the yield gain from the ultra early seeding, spring wheat gave by far the biggest yield gain, up to a 41% gain in yield, improvement in yield in spring wheat. Like, that's massive. Oats was about 17% and barley was about 11%. So the spring wheat definitely benefited the most. But from our perspective, in fact, Tyler McBlain from near Brantford, Ontario, Onondaga, on very, very tough clay soil, he went out in February and frost seeded oats, and he just tweeted on yesterday, I think, or this morning, I forget which, but tweeted to me that the oats looked awesome. And in fact, it was Sunday morning. He was out scouting. He was checking his decimeters as well to see how much nitrogen loss he had. But his oat crop seeded in February sat in that tough, wet clay soil for essentially like 6 weeks almost. But the oats were there. They were greening up. They were emerging. So from our perspective, we haven't seen barley and oats to be that much more sensitive than spring wheat. I'm a big early proponent, but the spring wheat first always, because it benefits the most.
Yeah, and I think too, included in that is, I don't care if oats, barley, spring wheat, seed treatment early for sure. We did a wheat school episode with Shad Milligan from Syngenta, and also Jeremy Boychin was on the show. I'm going to go back like 3 or 4 weeks, and he was talking about this too. Jeremy, basically was talking about, I don't care if it's early or late, the data shows like a seed treatment is important because the disease spectrum changes as you get further along in the season.
Yeah, 100%. And what's interesting is you when you go ultra early, you immediately think, oh, seed treatment's even more critical, but it's still critical because you're putting that seed into a really hostile environment. But believe it or not, a lot of the diseases don't really get going under those super cold soils. So it's just critical all the way through, because as Jeremy said, it's critical early because of the hostile environment. You want to give it all the pluses you can. It's critical later because you actually, if it's wet, you actually get more disease pressure under those little warmer soil temperatures than you do ultra early. So yeah, seed treatments, I don't know, for the cost of them, I don't understand why growers have such a reluctance to use them, because they're a pretty low cost investment for a whole lot of excellent insurance. And so just do it, drive on.
Yeah. So when I ask this question to a lot of agronomists, and I'm paraphrasing here, doing the anecdotal aggregate thing, but I think a lot of it has to do with the impact. One, not a lot of test strips out there, and two, you don't see the results. Like, what I don't mean is not the results of the impact. I mean, you actually, like, killing a weed. I sprayed that weed dead. The activity and the action that we're talking about when it comes to a seed treatment is entirely out of your view. You don't see, right? You don't see those diseases being taken care of, and oh, look, we took care of, like, it's totally invisible, and that's a bit of a human nature mental thing. Is that fair?
Oh, 100%. I mean,
okay,
nothing better than seeing that weed die, right?
Yeah, take that, Kosha. Boom.
Yep. I even like it better if I never see the weed and I walk the field and there is no weeds, and I say, yes, we did it right. But with the seed treatments, you're bang on, because how many growers dig up plants to look at the root system and see how healthy the root system is? And even a guy like me that digs up lots of plants and looks at roots, man, the disease has got to be fairly severe before you can actually see it on the roots. And so when you see a healthy root system, you just say, oh yeah, this is great. And you don't give the credit to that seed treatment that you should. If you dig up a root system and it's a problem, then that's when you start, digging deeper to say, is this Phytophthora or Pythium, or what disease is it? And how do I control that next year? And then you get years, when it's super dry, you get a whole different disease spectrum and a much reduced disease spectrum. And so you kind of go, wow, where do we do, or how do we determine what we do on those dry seasons? And Utah, now I can't remember her last name, from Montana State, that did a really nice presentation on dry season diseases, because Montana was so dry for so many years, but they were still seeing benefits to the seed treatment because they got into different diseases under those dry conditions.
Yeah, and
But Kelvy, that was her name.
okay,
Sorry.
yeah,
Sorry.
And a lot of times we talk about pulling up a plant to look at the roots, but from an nodulation perspective, so soybeans and pulse crops, we don't. I'm going to guess here. There's not a lot of farmers that are pulling up plants to look at the root structure and some of those things that are happening underneath the soil profile in wheat and canola and some of those other crops. Is that fair?
And you can't just pull them up, Sean.
You got to dig them up. Don't just pull them up.
A lot of the roots. You got to one of these. You got to have one of these, a little hand trowel with you or a shovel, and dig them up. And to really do it right, you should wash them off very carefully. But nobody in the field has the capability to do that. But yeah, digging them up carefully and trying to have a good look at what's happening on that root system really can be pretty instructional.
Now, what also is happening in the field, you and I were chatting during the commercial break about how weeds are weird. I would even use some stronger language about weeds, but depending on what the spring conditions are and that environment, it really can bring on and enhance some weeds' ability to thrive and others to not. It is one of those amazing things about the ecology of what's happening in the top profile of that soil.
Yeah, absolutely. And so this year, two weeds that I'm seeing all over the place that I haven't seen for quite some time is early whitlow grass. And by the way, it's not a grass at all. Why they call it whitlow grass, I have no idea. There's a yellow whitlow grass with a yellow flower. There's early whitlow grass, which is a cousin or a sister with a white flower. But on sand soils this year, normally it's chickweed, chickweed, chickweed. I get to sand soils, it's chickweed. That's what we're fighting. Well, there's still some chickweed there. It's not like you can take your foot off the gas to control chickweed in those sand farms. But this whitlow grass is just thick as thick can be in many spots in the field. And I haven't seen it for probably 3 years. And then we also have time-leaved speedwells showing up in the non-sandy soils. And again, that's a weed that often I don't see in the spring. So what is different about the spring of 2024 that caused those two weeds to germinate? Because the seeds obviously have lived in the soil for however many years, and this year they're germinating, and the last 2 or 3, they simply didn't. And I have no idea, but I find it just fascinating how every year it's a different weed of the year, so to speak, or weed spectrum of the year based on the winter conditions that we've had. Yeah.
Well, some of them just come no matter what the conditions.
Oh yeah,
kochia,
the dandelion, fleabane. Oh yeah, for sure. They're always there. The shepherd's purse, by the way, the shepherd's purse, even up here in Bruce County, which is a pretty short season area in Ontario, the shepherd's purse is already in bloom and setting seed.
Wow.
And so this is the challenge in winter wheat. We just haven't been able to get out there and kill it in the spring. So again, fall weed control on winter wheat, really, really important. And as we talked last week, even on the ultra early seeding spring wheat in Western Canada, fall weed control should really be your focus to get good weed control.
Hey, great stuff, Pete. Hey, what's you scouting all week, or what do you got planned?
Oh yeah, so the agribusiness breakfast meetings start tomorrow morning, Sean. So I will be in Ridgetown to see what's going on in the rest of you just can't be everywhere. So they hold these agribusiness breakfast meetings. They're a bunch of fun, and that's really a good way to keep up and maybe hopefully learn some things and impart some discussion. And I have the word on Wednesday, and then beyond that, it's just scout, and if hopefully I can find some time to get my planter ready, because one of these days it's going to be dry enough. Johnson needs to plant his own corn, so it would be nice if we were ready.
Yeah, well, yeah, you got to get your own seed in the ground. You just can't help everybody else, Pete. You got to think about yourself too once in a while.
Yeah, the shoemaker's children go barefoot, right, Sean? That's just the way it works.
Yeah. Nice. Hey, Pete, have yourself a great week.
Yeah, you too. Thanks, Sean.
Okay, we'll be right back here on RealAg Radio for more on Agronomic Monday right after this.
CDC endorsed Endure is a new oat line from Alliance Seed. High yielding with excellent disease resistance and the quality end users ask for, all in one great oat variety. CDC Endure provides the high beta-glucan levels to make heart-healthy products like breakfast cereals. For more information on CDC Endure Oats, as well as any other products from Alliance Seed, check out allianceseed.com or visit any Alliance Seed authorized retailers.
Hi, I'm Bernard Tobin, host of the Soybean School on RealAgriculture.com. Throughout the year, on the Soybean School, we'll bring you timely agronomic video content from planting to harvest, from the latest agronomic research to the latest in production technology. Check out our massive video library on YouTube, RealAgriculture.com, or download the audio podcast versions wherever you get your podcasts. The Soybean School is brought to you by BASF and Syngenta Canada.
And welcome back to RealAg Radio here on Rural Radio 147 Sirius XM. It's Agronomic Monday. Shaun Haney, your host. Before we get to some more content and more discussion, I want to mention the Agronomist tonight, 8 o'clock Eastern, 6 o'clock Mountain. Tonight, Lindsay Smith, the host, will be talking about on-farm field trials. What are things you need to consider? How do you build the right plan? Do you have a methodology? What are you trying to achieve? It's going to be a great show. It is Real Agriculture in prime time. Love the Agronomist. You can find that by going to realagriculture.com/live or the Real Agriculture YouTube channel. It's always fun to also participate in the live chat that's going on while the show is happening as well. Real sense of community with the people that are tuning into the Agronomist. You can also get CCA CU credits as well for watching the show. So Lindsay will talk to you about that when the broadcast happens. Now, earlier, when I was talking to Pete, we mentioned my interview with Shad Milligan of Syngenta, talking about why treat your seed. And we talked about, throughout the growing season. So I want to, let's play that conversation. Here it is. Shad, there's still snow outside, but never too early to think about the things that we need to do to get that crop launched out of the ground. One of the things that you can do from a management perspective is use seed treatment on a crop like wheat. Now, are there situations where we should or should not use a seed treatment, or what? Talk about that decision-making process.
That's a great question. I'm just super happy to see snow still out there. So glad, because that means moisture. And 9 times out of 10, you as a grower are going to be seeding into moisture. Whether that's cold soils, warm soils, depending on what time of year you want to start. When you start to think about some of the boundaries we're pushing with seeding, and what I've seen is that you need that protection, and really the biggest thing is soil-borne disease. That's one of the factors that you need to protect that seed from. That seed becomes a food source. I think we tend to forget the seed's a living thing, and we want to take care of it. We need to nurture it. We need to get it out of the ground, because that's a big thing. You need to get your crop established, get that first true leaf so it can grab the sun and start growing. But once we stick it in the ground, it becomes a food source for some other things. So early season disease like Pythium, Fusarium, Rhizoctonia are all there to consume that seed. So partially different environment factors actually favor each disease. So something like Pythium you'll find in cold, wet soils. And again, I use that, it may be the snow right now, but that's going to turn into moisture. We've got colder soils. And if you look at just the way farming practices have, it's really that no-till farming. It takes a while for that soil to warm up. So you do have that environment for something like Pythium to cause damage to that seed. But if you look at the spectrum of the different soil-borne diseases, what you have to grow through and what they like, something like Fusarium really likes warmer to drier soils, and that's the same with Rhizoctonia, kind of that drier soil profile. But that's what you get to as the spring wears on, as we move forward, that soil profile warms up, dries out. So it's just that really broad range of diseases that can affect your crop through different growing stages before it even gets out of the ground. So you really want to protect that seed. The other side of this too is I strongly encourage any growers out there, use a lab and get a seed test done, because the other part of this is seed-borne disease. Especially in the wheat side of things, something like Fusarium granularium is a very, very vicious disease, and it can cause impact on your stand establishment if not treated. So there are treatments out there that give you that protection, but at the end of the day, you have a gamut of different diseases that are affecting that crop. It becomes that food source. So we're trying to establish that. You want to get that crop out of the ground healthy to move on to the next stage of growth on that. So really, it all comes back to stand establishment and getting that stand establishment.
But I do think there's a lot of growers that, back in my early days or earlier career when I'm selling seed, I ran into a lot of people early in the season thinking, hey, I'm gonna use a seed treatment. But as we get further on in the spring, things warm up a little bit, then it's like I don't need to use it. Basically, what you're saying is that may not be true, actually.
Yeah, that's a great point. I've run into it several different occasions, and I understand. Maybe it's an economic reason, maybe it's I don't have time to do it. But at the end of the day, just because your soil warms up doesn't mean the soil-borne diseases are going anywhere. It just favors different environmental conditions for those diseases to thrive in. So what I would say is something like Rhizoctonia and Fusarium species in the soil, those are going to really start to get you as that soil warms up. Pythium, again, is really more, where it thrives is that cold, wet soils. But again, you're growing through these different stages and you have these different environmental conditions that are more conducive for these diseases, that just because it's warming up, the one thing with saying that, though, your seed may get out of the ground a bit quicker, faster, because you've got the biology of the soil warming up. You've got that side of things helping out.
To grow out of that stage. But as well is that coming out of the surface, and a lot of these diseases in soil, the trash on the soil actually is holding that disease inoculum as well, because you actually have plants growing through that as well, which can be picked up, and then that moves into this plant as well. So you mentioned seed testing. Are there some soil tests that I can do to figure out if I actually have some of these diseases inoculating in the soil?
So great question. I think from a lab standpoint, I'm not exactly sure if they've got tests, but one thing that we were able to do from a Syngenta seed care perspective is that we worked with our pathologist of our Honeywood farm, and she had actually sent us out baits to really quantify disease, because that's a big thing. Like, how do you quantify soil-borne disease? Is it present? Is it not there? How much of it's there? It's a harder thing to do, but what we were able to do, and what I've seen firsthand, is that with the test tubes that we had set up and had the agar that was a medium for, we had Pythium, Fusarium, and Rhizoctonia out there, and having those baits there, we're able to quantify, say, yeah, like we are finding Pythium species. And from that, we've actually worked, our pathologist, Ashley Dixon, has gone back and found a lot of different Pythium species that we know we haven't seen out there as well as before. So I think it's one of these things in the Western Canadian as growers, that there is going to be soil-borne disease each year, whether or not the degree of it is really environmental conditions dependent on that. It's been interesting on the evolution of seed treatments too, is that some of the actives, so some of the SDHI molecules that have been brought in for Rhizoctonia control. Rhizoctonia was really something that, and I'm guilty of this, it was just thought to be a disease that caused, on the canola side of things, and affected canola. With some survey work done by Ted Laboon and our seed care side of things with the University of Guelph, we saw that actually Rhizoctonia was, species affected all crops. It wasn't just canola, whether it was wheat, lentils, soybeans. But what we saw with new technologies coming to the marketplace, especially the SDHIs, it really helped push back on that Rhizoctonia and protect that plant. And what we saw is just, again, better stand establishment. And that's what we're seeing really is that, these seed treatments have really come a long ways in a short period of time for that protection for the grower. So again, you're making that decision, you may have had a great year, but at the end of the day, you don't know what the spring is going to bring. You don't know what the rest of the year is going to bring. So if you don't set yourself up for success off the start from that stand establishment and really hit what that plant count is, the rest of the year is going to just kind of not be there for you.
Is there any economic modeling in terms of, commodity prices have fallen? Some producers may be looking at things from a cost perspective. Is there any modeling out there in terms of how to factor in this decision to where prices are, or does it really come down to what do you think spring's going to look like?
Yeah, I don't have the crystal ball for spring. And that's every year. You don't know what's going to look like, but to set yourself up for success, it's probably one of the less economic impactful decisions you can make in the business that has the greatest impact. And what I mean by that is that relative to other farm input expenses, it's relatively a low cost for what you gain in return. Again, and I come back from a stand establishment. Every year you're trying to get that crop out of the ground, and I talked beforehand, you're putting that living organism, that seed, into an environment where it's food for something else. So you want to protect it, you want to get it out of the ground, and with that, I mean, there's different layers within the confines of the seed treatment world. You have and different economic returns with each, but at the end of the day, really, it's about setting that stand establishment up for success, and that's the biggest goal what the seed treatments give you, is that protection to give you that stand establishment.
That was Shad Milligan of Syngenta Canada talking about why you should treat your seed. Of course, the Wheat School is brought to you by C&M Seeds, Syngenta Canada, and Alberta Grains. You can find more great episodes by going to wheatschool.com, or you can find a whole bunch of playlists over the past number of years on the Real Agriculture YouTube channel. When we come back on Real Ag Radio, we're going to get to the top ag news stories of the day right after this quick break.
What's next for your fields? At Pioneer, delivering industry-leading genetics drives everything we do. From the scientists in the lab to our local teams with boots on the ground, we are determined to get there first. Developing top-performing products, proven in more growing conditions than ever before. Pioneer. What's next happens here. Visit pioneer.com/Canada to learn more.
I'm Lindsay Smith from RealAgriculture.com. Join me Monday nights for The Agronomist, a 1-hour live and interactive show broadcast across YouTube, Facebook, and X. Monday nights at 8 p.m. Eastern, I host expert agronomists from all over the country to give you answers to some of the toughest agronomic questions. Join us live or catch the replay Tuesday morning. That's The Agronomist with me, Lindsay Smith, Monday nights live at 8 p.m. Eastern.
And welcome back to Real Ag Radio here on this Monday. It's now time for the top ag news stories of the day, which is brought to you by The Dirt. From nutrient management to the latest weather, market, and ag trends, The Dirt, an economics podcast, is your place for farm-smart topics to boost your profitability. Join Mike Howell on Season 3 of The Dirt podcast, available now at nutrient-economics.com. And on this Monday, sometimes Mondays are slow. I think I said this last week too, but boy, I had no trouble filling this week's news. Crazy. Okay, up first, a good friend of Real Agriculture, real mentor of mine, Kim McConnell, has been awarded with a pretty prestigious award in the city of Calgary. It's been 40 years since Kim McConnell started his first agribusiness, Fieldstone Marketing. McConnell built that company into what eventually became AdFarm, one of North America's largest agricultural marketing companies. McConnell has been a constant presence in moving the Canadian agri-food industry forward, even after moving away from his role as CEO of AdFarm, and was instrumental in the establishment of the Canadian Centre for Food Integrity. Kim's been very involved also with 4-H Canada, amongst a number of other projects. He was also past Ag Marketer of the Year, Mentor of the Year from the Canadian Youth Business Foundation. He's got the Order of Canada, Canadian Agricultural Hall of Fame. There's a lot of stuff that Kim has been recognized for. So the Haskayne School of Business at the University of Calgary and the Calgary Chamber of Commerce has named McConnell the 2024 recipient of the Inspiring Business Leader Award. So big congratulations. June 20th is the award ceremony. Well-deserved recognition of friend of Real Agriculture, Kim McConnell. The budget's coming out on Tuesday. Economists are warning that tax hikes are on the table in Tuesday's federal budget as Finance Minister Chrystia Freeland seeks to square the circle of tens of billions of dollars in new spending announcements and a promise to not push the deficit any higher. This is going to be a real. I'm very interested to see what the messaging is from the government tomorrow. The Globe and Mail reports you can really expect there to be a key focus on housing, affordability, and economic growth. There is discussions that are a few things that we mentioned around agriculture, update on the 18th month, the interswitching project, possibly PMRA transformation information, maybe some off-CAF funding increases, sustainable ag strategy funding increases a little bit. One person described that as token increases. Don't expect a lot about agriculture in the budget, but there is an expectation tax hikes are in the budget. So we're going to be talking. We're going to be talking about that on the Real Ag Issues panel at the back end of the week on some of the ramifications of all that. In Michigan, 3 more dairy herds have been infected with the H5N1 bird flu virus, prompting concerns about its spread across state lines. USDA has advised farmers to test their herds before moving them to prevent further transmission. Tomorrow on the show, Lindsay is having a conversation with CFIA, getting an update from a Canadian perspective. Where does Canada stand in all of this? Where do we stand on cases? Have we seen any cases when it comes to bovines? What should be done from a biosecurity standpoint on dairies? Whole bunch that and a whole lot more. And I'm thinking about this from a beef perspective too. And there's a lot of very concerning directions that this can move going into the future. So be on this one, everybody. Don't ignore it. Don't ignore it. Speaking of beef, wholesale beef prices are stabilizing, possibly. Choice box beef prices firmed $2.20 on Friday. The second straight daily gain and push back above the $300 level. Modest premiums in May hog futures as May lean hog futures took over lead month status last Friday at 3.315 premium to the CME lean hog index, which is another 72 cents to the $90.56 as of April 11th. The FBI has opened up a criminal investigation on the container ship that took down Baltimore's Francis Scott Key Bridge last month, looking to determine if the ship's crew left the port knowing the vessel was troubled. Officials are reviewing the events that led up to the Dali container ship colliding with one of the Key Bridge's support pillars. 2 U.S. officials with knowledge of the matter told the Washington Post. Wow. Of course, it is well documented that this ship had some other issues previously. This wasn't the first issue that this ship has had. There's been a significant shift in the feedstock landscape for biomass-based diesel fuel, particularly focusing on the growing dominance of renewable diesel production over biodiesel and the consequential change in feedstock preferences, according to 3 agricultural economists at FarmDoc. The recent shift towards tallow and longer-term shift towards yellow grease and corn oil makes sense given the relatively low carbon intensity. This all has to do with renewable diesel made the 3 feedstocks in the California LCFS low carbon fuel standard program. The lower CI scores translate into higher dollar credit values per gallon, wrote the economist. Current feedstock distribution, soybean oil still holds a significant share, accounting for about 42% of the feedstocks for both biodiesel and renewable diesel. However, its dominance has decreased from the nearly 48% at the beginning of the decade. Yellow grease has seen an increase in share, now comprising 20% of feedstocks, with corn oil also contributing 15%. If you have any feedback on today's show, we'd love to hear from you. Send me an email, shaney@realagriculture.com. Or, of course, find us across all the different social media platforms. Or you can always call the Real Ag Feedback line, 855-776-6147. Thanks, everybody, for getting real and getting connected with Real Ag Radio. And, of course, we'll chat again tomorrow. Cheers, everybody.
Thank you for downloading this RealAg Radio podcast, brought to you by Coragen Max Insecticide from FMC. When you need to protect your crops from damaging insects, Coragen Max Insecticide delivers fast, selective, extended control of grasshoppers, Bertha armyworms, diamondback moth, cutworms, and more. Ask your retailer today.